All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Toby Varland. I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio, and we've kind of gone from it sounds like a big global corporation to maybe a little bit smaller, and now we're going to go real small. So my company, this is a family company, though my branch of the family doesn't own any of it, but we are a family-owned job shop electroplating company with one location in Cincinnati, Ohio. We've been here since 1946. So we're in manufacturing, but we don't make anything. We're a job shop. We don't have established contracts with our customers. We see what shows up on our receiving docks every day, and we electroplate it and we ship it back out. So we currently offer 9 different types of electroplating, primary finishes with dozens of different variations within those things. Our organization has about 50 full-time employees. We've been at that number for a long time. I will probably stay around that number for a long time still. Like a lot of manufacturing places, we operate around the clock from Monday morning to Friday evening each week. And we have especially for a company our size, we have a large variety of parts that we process. We do thousands of different parts each year. For hundreds of different companies across a variety of industries, as it says here, automotive, electrical, military. And the parts that we plate can range from hundreds of pieces per pound to several pounds per piece. From order sizes ranging from 2 pounds to 30,000 pounds. And all of that within our one facility on several plating lines needing to be able to handle all of these different configurations. And with that, we average turning parts around in about 4.5 business days. So the title of this was Upgrading Legacy Systems, and I was basically why did we need to upgrade, and what was this legacy system? Where were we coming from? So my company, the son of one of our original founders, he made a big push to embrace technology and automation in the 80s and 90s especially, earlier than most in the electroplating industry. Throughout the 80s, we actually wrote a whole system of COBOL applications that ran on an IBM AS400, and we sold that to other electroplating companies around the country. We've since gotten out of that business, although we still run and I still develop some of that COBOL stuff today, although not much. But one of the things that makes this a challenge is due to the nature of being a job shop, our automated lines are constantly changing. We have to develop or implement new chemistries, new technologies, a lot of new things, and it seems like something that wouldn't change that much, but I can tell you after having been there for 25 years, it does. So the PLCs that we deployed in the 90s especially relied on a lot of serial communications and remote I/O racks that were daisy chained one to the other to another with all of this serial communication, and it worked for a long time. It still works, but it's limiting us. And more importantly, for a long time as a small company, we operated in this mode of, hey, we're always moving forward. We're never looking back. We're not necessarily always having a clear strategy. It's more, here's the challenge that's come up this week, so let's see what we can do to fix it. And then rather than taking the time to say, okay, do we need to spread this to other lines within our facility, it's just, okay, what's next? And what's next? And what's next? And what's next? Which has presented problems over time with standardization, with code maintenance, some of the things that the other speakers have talked about here. There's no documentation for anything. Spaghetti connections, all this stuff, all these problems that happen in large enterprises can happen in a very small organization if we're not careful, and that's what we have seen. And just, the demands of modern business mean that we've reached limits of what our legacy PLCs could do in terms of actually collecting and centralizing and contextualizing good data. So those are, we've been automated, and it's been good for 30 years, and it's enabled us to have a lot of success. But we've kind of reached this breaking point where there wasn't enough strategy, and we needed to really think about how we could modernize and bring this stuff forward. So our goals with this stuff were, obviously modernizing and having better data visibility and having better historical data, um, establishing a foundation that would allow us to standardize but also be flexible. 90% of the functionality of our automated electroplating lines are the same, but that 10% that needs to be different, we want to have a way of accomplishing that 10% without sacrificing standardization and strategy. We wanted to eliminate some of the tech debt that we had internally and embrace industry standards. My former boss, who retired several years ago, he was very insular, and he thought that he knew the best way to do everything. As most of us engineers, we always feel like we know the best, but we all really know that that's not the case. But he didn't really look to outside tools or anything outside of the building, and just kind of figured out ways to do things. And again, that works to a point, but especially as he retired and as he tried to bring other people into the process, it was not easy to do. So our goal with this upgrade, especially as a small company where we don't have a lot of margin for error all the time, was to take it slow and really think about, what do we need to accomplish here? What are the most important things? Reflect on our past projects and figure out what was successful, what could we have done better. Think about long-term things and not just, what's my problem today? What's my problem this week? And then again, a common theme that I hear here and I hear throughout the industry is we have to reduce lock-in. We have to not rely so much on closed and proprietary systems. One of the things that's not on here that was another major goal, and it fits in with these things, is, with modernizing, we want to embrace tools and strategies that fit the industry and make it so that when I do need to hire a new programmer who's going to work on our automation, our PLCs, that I'm using tools that they are either interested in or they've heard of, or some of these things, rather than bringing them into just a mess. When we've had things that are a mess, we've tried to bring people in and we've had them leave 3 months later because they just don't want to deal with that. So those are some of the goals of what we've been doing. So my company has been partnering with Opto22, who might be a little bit of a smaller player compared to the Siemens and the Rockwells and those things, but we've been using their hardware and software for automation for 30 years, and it's always been a great partnership. And it's something where we wanted to stick with them if we could, because of the value that we've gotten with them over the years, and because I'll explain some of the other reasons why we wanted to make sure we stuck with Opto in a moment. But what we have done is we have upgraded to their newest processor family, which you can see an example of over at the inductive automation booth in the trade show. But that processor family is enabling us to move away from the serial I/O to Ethernet I/O, as well as having a lot more capabilities, and it gives us a lot of ability to modernize things. One of the great things that I love about these particular processors is it allows us to migrate our code base away from Opto's proprietary programming software, which is great in a lot of ways, but we're migrating away from that to a code assist platform, which again enables us to expand our tool set and kind of standardize into a tool that is more commonly known outside of our building. We've also been using Opto's proprietary PC-based HMI software for many years, but we bought an Ignition license, which we really love the Ignition product. So we're moving our primary SCADA, our PC-based control screens, into Ignition along with these Groove Epic PLCs. Having access to historical data has always been a big thing for us, and we are using the historian module within Ignition, but even that, we don't always like having to build charts and use Ignition for visualization. So we have a real-time bridge, for lack of a better word, that's feeding the data from the SQL database that Ignition puts it into an Influx time series database. which is great because it allows some of my smarter production people to go into the data explorer there and kind of explore that data on their own without needing to know anything about how it's stored. And we also are using Grafana for visualization of that long-term data that's stored in Influx. And then something that we've started recently is we've deployed Copia for some source code revision, tracking, and review. Even though some of the tools that we're using aren't fully supported, it's still gotten us into a better workflow and a better mindset of moving forward. And the thing that has been really great for a small company like us about all of these things is the cost is very manageable. As Alicia mentioned, you can get into some of these things for not that, for a reasonable investment, but reasonable investment means different things to different companies. So being able to leverage some open source tools where we're literally paying nothing and running them on small $500 computers to start has been a key for us through this process. So some of the obstacles that we faced in this process, as a job shop that runs, we can't really have downtime. We don't have the room in our facility to shut a line down even for a week to do a big upgrade. So as we're moving from this legacy hardware, we've gone through this whole process of there's a piecemeal over time upgrade where we still have most legacy hardware, but we would upgrade 2 IO racks this week to a new system. And then the next week we would upgrade more IO. So that's one of the things that it led us to sticking with Opto 22, because with their products we were able to continue having the legacy code base running while moving IO over to a new platform. And then once all the IO was moved over, it allowed us to focus on updating the software to take advantage of some of those new things. Again, cost is a big obstacle for a small company like this. We don't have budgets in the millions of dollars to do all this stuff. And again, every company, cost obstacle is a big deal, but for a small company of 50 people, it's an especially big thing for us. And then complexity is a big deal for a small company. We have limited staff. It's always great for me to come to conferences like this and hear people talk about the teams and the collaboration between OT and IT. And that's really easy at my company because I'm both. Which it's not a good thing. It would be better if it weren't. But it's one of the reasons why I like some of these tools and why I have enjoyed working with Opto for as many years as I have is the first time I ever dealt with Opto when I first started, because I started in college in material handling and working on the plant floor, but one of my first projects was literally something wasn't working. So my former boss told me to call Opto support and just kind of figure it out. And I talked to a support engineer there. This was, I think, 2002, whose name was Julio. And the last time I called Opto support last year, I also talked to Julio. So that partnership has just been amazing for us. But one of the things that we love about that is with Opto, you buy stuff and you get the whole package. Sometimes you don't even buy stuff. I've called them before and said, hey, I'd like to try this new piece of software, and they send me the activation code and say, have fun. We've gotten into some other products. We have one line that we bought that was supposed to be turnkey from a vendor that runs on a Rockwell platform, and it's great, but it wasn't turnkey. And we had to buy a Studio 5000 license in order to make some changes to that. And we bought the license and then realized, well, that covers ladder logic, but not structured text. And that covers programming, but doesn't cover the HMIs. And for a company of our size, I can't afford to deal with, distributors and licensing complexity. And it's just not sustainable for a small company like us. So those were some of the obstacles that we really were trying to overcome. So this is still very much an in-process thing for us. It's changing, but even with where we've gotten, we are finding that our Our software is easier to maintain and update. It's clear to see that actually stopping, and instead of coding first and thinking later, that thinking first and coding later um, has provided noticeable value for us. Um, the serial networks and the serial communication that we had, the 30-year-old industrial wiring is not always the most reliable. So we're finding that our hardware is more reliable. Maintenance is loving the fact that wiring has been new and it's easier to find replacement parts. Um, our actual, our business people, our process analysts are finding a lot of value in having centralized data where they can go into, they can log into Influx through their browser without installing software and without me having pre-built a dashboard for them, and looking through data. And when they find something they like, it's very easy for them to say, hey, make me a permanent dashboard so I can get back to this. And with having some of that data centralized, we're not very far along the path, but we're looking into ways of potentially being able to integrate some AI, some machine learning into some of those things to gain even more insight from that data. We've seen through this process, there's less downtime, there's cost savings on maintenance, there's energy savings that have come from all of this. So all of these things, they've just been huge for us. One of the things that we worried about is we have a lot of longtime operators down on the plant floor who are not always excited about change, because what they have noticed a lot of times is change brings progress and it brings new bugs. And that's always going to be the case. But with really taking the time to slow down and think about this and get input from operators on what works and what doesn't, we found that they're all excited about what they just all call the new system. And they think that it's made their job easier and allows them to focus less on fighting with the computer system and more on, hey, the computer system makes their job easier. So that's been good, and we're confident that we've created a foundation for continued success as we continue to iterate our processes, as we continue to move forward in the years to come. So some of the things that I feel like, again, when I talk about small manufacturers, I mean, very small. But I think a lot of these things are fairly universal, where the time spent in planning has just been invaluable for us, and it's been a weakness of my company. It's been a weakness of myself historically. Is again, I just dive in. So stopping to plan's been really, really critical. Establishing a loop where we iterate and then we evaluate and we actually think about things has been much more valuable than that constant mindset of, all right, well, we just did this and now we're moving on. And we're moving on and we're moving on. And then somebody tells us 6 months later, hey, this thing's never worked. We're trying to avoid that. As I mentioned, partnering with the right vendors. I feel like the smaller you are, the more important it is that your partnerships are the right ones. And we feel like we've done that, but you also have to have the right people in-house. With being a job shop and doing this sort of piecemeal upgrade and this kind of continuous upgrade process, it doesn't work very well for us to rely on a system integrator, because they're not always available at our beck and call to come in when we can fit in parts of this upgrade. So as I mentioned, for us, open source software offers some great opportunities to at least as a starting point, and for us more than a starting point, but it offers some great opportunities to get benefits from the centralized data without having to spend much. And then we don't, as a small company, we don't use a lot of buzzwords all the time, but the whole theme of this session, smart manufacturing, is obviously what the goal is for all of us. And we've just found it really requires being creative and thinking outside the box a bit. I don't really know how else to say it. It's a hard thing to say that as a programmer and as a technical person, that creativity is a really underrated skill and talent in this industry. So looking forward, again, with these themes of AI and machine learning, a lot of it boils down to you have to have the data. You have to have You have to have the data. It has to be cleaned. It has to be contextualized. If you're garbage in, garbage out, shit in, shit out, however you want to say it. If you don't have the data, none of this stuff's going to matter. And that's true whether you are a multinational corporation or whether you are one building in Cincinnati. It may be even more important the smaller you are, because even though we're very small, we're competing against companies that are not small. So this upgrades put us into a much better spot in terms of data collection. These possibilities they're very exciting. They're also very daunting. My company's a long way away from something like Joe AI. As great as that looked, that's kind of the dream. I don't have any idea yet how to get there, but we'll figure it out. We're still working on upgrading these legacy systems. As a small company, again, as I mentioned, I'm IT, I'm OT, so it's not like I can devote all of my time to this. Again, we don't have downtime on all of our machines, and we don't have the budget to just go out and do all of this stuff at once. So we're still working on this, but we're working as we do to try to learn how to use some of this stuff to get into things like predictive maintenance and production optimization, energy management, and all of that stuff. So with that, we haven't fully committed to a strategy for AI and machine learning because, again, with our legacy system, it really wasn't possible. But we think we've kind of, we're moving in the right direction at the right time. So I think that's all that I have. Thank you guys for having me and for listening.